Hello, everybody. My name is Lat Mackey, and this is Sequence Break IL. A look at speedrunning, game development, content creation, and everything in between. And hope you're all having a good one. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. And gonna share for this episode an interview from February of 2020 with MunchaKoopas, who is one of the first people I actually ended up meeting, like IRL, in real life, in the community. And I'm going to share that story a little bit because I think it's kind of interesting just how we all get to know each other, or how you meet somebody, in speedrunning, to say the least. Because most of the time, right, we're speedrunning from home. Probably meet somebody through Discord or something like that, or, anything like, or maybe Twitch chat or something like that. But then you end up meeting somebody in real life and it becomes a thing. But MunchaKoopas is, one of the reasons that I want to chat with him at first was because of his speedrunning with Shovel Knight, but then also his work in QA. And for those of you who aren't too familiar, QA was the process of testing out a game and finding the bugs, finding the clips and all the things you can do to break a game, and if it's something you want to keep in the game. And at the time, he was actually doing QA for Yacht Club Games, which is very familiar for doing Shovel Knight, and the wonderful game that is. If you haven't played Shovel Knight, what are you thinking? Go play Shovel Knight. No, I'm just kidding. It's a great game. If you're at all into retro, you're gonna love Shovel Knight if you haven't played it yet. But I'm recording this at the end of September in 2022. And Shovel Knight Dig has just been released, and I'm about a half an hour into it. I literally just started downloading it and playing it before I started recording this, and it reminded me of having this conversation with MunchaKoopas. Shovel Knight Dig, I'm really enjoying it, just the 30 minutes that I played of it so far. I'm sure I'm going to keep playing it. It's actually available on mobile, and so I was like, what are they doing differently for it is an on-screen, D-pad and jump buttons and stuff, so not always my favorite, but for this game, it's actually working really well, and if you play the game, you'll know what I mean. But more importantly, MunchaKoopas is been doing QA now for a while. He's no longer at Yacht Club Games, but he was previously also at Blizzard and is currently with that game company, which I was not aware of this, but they made, if you've never played Journey is a wonderful game on PS3, PS4. I think it's available on Steam as well. And it's one of those just experiences that, beautiful game, really fun to play. And that's according to MunchaKoopas' Twitter bio. It's funny because I got a chance to chat with MunchaKoopas a little bit during SGDQ 2022 this past summer, and we were chatting, just catching up and stuff like that, and I didn't even bother to ask if he was still with that game company. But anywho, there are some really interesting tidbits and details and things that go into QA that I was definitely not aware of. And I think it's really interesting to see game development from that perspective. Like, what's it like to try to break a game so that you can make the end experience great for who's ever purchasing and playing the game, right? And so at times I can tell you it sounds a little bit thankless because you're literally just trying to do everything you can to break the game. And so on the flip side of that, you are getting a chance to play video games all the time, which admittedly is just one video game usually, or whatever project you're working on. But I just felt that there's a bunch of interesting details that MunchaKoopas shares, and I thought it'd be perfect timing. Let's talk a little bit of Shovel Knight with the new Shovel Knight game coming out. MunchaKoopas has been speedrunning this game for a while now, and admittedly on his SRC, he hasn't submitted a time in about 4 years or so, but I definitely grinded this game. And one of the runs I wanted to share with you, or want to highly recommend you get a chance to watch if you're at all interested in speedrunning and game development, at GDQX 2019. MunchaKoopas did a Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, and did a Custom Night Any Percent. But one of the devs, known as Waz, of all things, he's one of the chief artists for Yacht Club Games. I don't know if he's still there or not, but just hearing some of those tidbits and interesting details that a developer brings while the speedrunner is there breaking the game is a wonderful run. Just want to highly recommend. MunchaKoopas has actually done a few GDQ runs, just recently Destiny 2 a couple years ago. But I think this one is I just love hearing developers talk about their games while a speedrunner is like just destroying it, right? Like just totally kicking ass playing the game. And it's a lot of fun to listen and watch to. And it's actually not too long of a run as well. If I remember, it's under 40 minutes. So a great little run, VOD, GDQX 2019, highly recommend. And the other thing I wanted to share with you was kind of how I met MunchaKoopas, and this is why I think he's made such a lasting impression on me. And for the very first time I participated in a SGDQ, oh my gosh, is it 18 or 19? I think it was 18. SGDQ 2018. I was doing Bonk's Revenge, and MunchaKoopas, I believe, is still on the games committee for GDQ. Didn't know that at the time, but his job that year was to be the runner liaison, I believe it's what it's called. And so when the first thing, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I wouldn't say I'm terrified, but I'm just, I don't know anything that's going on. And I try to, I'm trying to find the registration my first time at the GDQ venue in, in Wisconsin, Minnesota. And, as soon as I finally find the check-in, MunchaKoopas walks up to me. No, before I even got to the check-in, MunchaKoopas walks up. Hey, Lat Mackey, how you doing? Glad you're here. Made me feel like a total rock star. Checked me in, showed me behind the stage, showed me where all the practice rooms are, showed me what this and that is. I almost wanted to ask him, like, what is this speedrunning thing? I don't even know what the hell's going on. Because I've only been speedrunning for like about a year when I did my first GDQ run. And so I just... forever thankful to him for that experience. He also really was nice to give me some feedback on my submissions. So I have a feeling he might have seen my submissions. And I just thought it was just the kindest thing somebody could do. And for him, I don't know, it may not have been that big a thing for him, but for me, it really made this lasting impression that I think that's one of the reasons why I still to this day, if I meet people at events or things like that, it's so important to make them feel. That's why I think GDQ can be such a, it's great to, they have, I shouldn't even say GDQ, these in-person events are so impactful, is because we can interact with one another. And MunchaKoopas did this tremendous job of making me feel like I was really important. And by the way, I know I'm not, but I just love that feeling that he gave me. So MunchaKoopas, if you're ever going to listen to this, thank you so much for doing so. And thank you so much for saying yes to doing the podcast. I still share some of the clips from this interview with my game design students because I think there's some really interesting things to know if you want to go into Q&A, if it's something you want to pursue, or even game development by itself. And I'm glad that Yacht Club Games had such a success with Shovel Knight, and that they've done so much DLC for it. Here now we have a new game, Dig, and I feel like Shovel Knight is such a great game to have so much success. Like, just glad to see like games like this are going to continue to get supported, and that people want to play these games. So if you haven't yet, go try out Shovel Knight Dig. And hope you enjoy this conversation about speedrunning, QA, game development, all that kind of fun stuff with MunchaKoopas. Enjoy. What is it about so the speedrun I find utterly fascinating. And can you maybe touch on a couple of things that make the speedrun unique, and what's kind of exciting about doing a speedrun of Shovel Knight?
Sure. So the most fun thing about speedrunning Shovel Knight for me, like specifically Shovel Knight the character, is everything you can do with the shovel. And there's a lot of very subtle timings and like tricks you can do that make this, generally considered clunky character move rather, adeptly. And once you figure that out, you really, and if you have an eye for level design, you can really see that every single one of the things, like practically, that we do in a speedrun has to some extent been considered. Mind you, yeah, they didn't expect a lot of precise movements or like specific tricks, but with the distance of platforms and like the height Shovel Knight jumps and all of these things, the speed at which he moves, like all of it has been considered. And when you learn how to do it, it just flows like seamlessly. At least I've always felt that way. But yeah, I just think it's the physics really is what really nailed me. The physics and the interaction with the environment. Like that's what gets me.
Totally agree. When you were first learning or first started doing runs, what's your approach? Were you doing the type of thing where you practice certain tricks or certain levels, or were you doing full runs? Like how do you approach a speedrun like Shovel Knight?
So for me, because it was also the first game I had ever speedrun, I was also honestly trying to get my gaming chops back,
sure,
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And when I first started it, the person to watch was Captain Drake, and he was doing any percent. And I tried doing any percent, but I kept dying everywhere. And at the time, any percent, you had to break all the checkpoints. For anyone not in the know about Shovel Knight, like there's a checkpoint system, and you can physically break them to obtain more money, which allows you to buy more stuff. You can see why that's nice for the speedrun, because it saves a lot of time. Anyway, I kept dying, so I decided I'm just going to run low percent, where you don't have to buy anything. Therefore, I don't have to break any checkpoints, and I can work on my fundamentals, if you will. So I tried to treat it, honestly, like learning a fighting game as well, because I had also just come off a couple of years of playing Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom.
Nice.
With my old roommates in college. So I looked at it like, okay, before I learn how to use all these relics and propeller daggers and stuff, I need to learn what the shovel can do. And that's what I decided to do.
That's kind of a crazy approach. Maybe you can answer this, but in typically a low percent run is really challenging because you're not getting power ups. You're not, you're not boosting up the
Hmm.
character to blast through things. Is it the same way in Shovel Knight?
It's definitely the same way because obviously, like now, I can't cross as many gaps as I can with the propeller dagger. I have to be very wary of spikes at the end of like stranded ship, which can very easily kill you. But something that really appealed to me about Shovel Knight was the platforming specifically, and that if you wanted to make it a game that was just you jumping around and none of the items, you could do that. Like Shovel Knight can be played a myriad of ways. Um, and to me, what was the most fun was mastering exactly where to place the character for optimal movement, just with like the base kit. To this day, he's still my favorite platforming character ever, and for good reason.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. Still, this all this time later, and he's still your favorite. I think it's really that's such an interesting approach. Like a tip. So when I approach a speed run, it's what's the fastest way from point A to point B. But
Hmm.
considering the fundamentals, that's the way you can really master a game. So you may be able to. I'm seeing how, by the way, this leads to a career in QA. By the way, because you're learning the fundamentals of the game this way,
Hmm.
and that's a
Like
much
it,
different approach. That's cool.
much in the same way that an athlete internalizes how to throw a fastball or how to jump over a hurdle. At some point they're not thinking about how close am I. They're just like, oh, they feel it.
Yeah.
And for me, this sounds really silly when I say it, but like I have internalized all of these actions in Shovel Knight. Like I have full mastery over this game's physics system. I know exactly like how much to press a button to move a character the amount I want to either avoid or not avoid doing whatever. Um, I forget like how I forget how much mastery I have until like our ops manager comes in and sees me play something. And she's like, I thought you were going to die at least like 7 times, but then you made it out of the pit somehow by doing some magic, and I don't understand what you're doing, but it looks really cool. I'm like, thank you. Um,
That's definitely
but
a
yeah,
sign. How has the speed run of the game evolved since you've been playing since 2014?
it's evolved a lot, mostly thanks to actually for someone that I learned a lot from. Was a runner named Busta Wolf. Busta Wolf, excuse me. He goes by many names, but anyway, he is still my dear friend. I actually just went to his wedding last October, um, and just he also treated Shovel Knight like learning a fighting game, and he was also someone that was he just if he had a goal, he was laser focused on it. And I am not that way, honestly. I have to try really hard to like get good at things. And he drove me a lot by just being a friend that was kind of there to be along for the ride and share with me this journey of learning how to play this strange video game. Um, but he would also he ran every category, so like he really revolutionized any percent at the time. And like back when there was still like a ton of RNG at the end of the game with where the map enemies would go, he got a really really good time and a really solid run at the time. It was a 48 like 36 or something, and he beat Drake's time by like almost a minute, I think.
Oh wow.
It was unheard of. He used like 2 less items and just had like really good strats overall. um, and then a patch came out which removed all the map RNG, and then like basically everyone else just steamrolled over his old time. But it's just like if you go back and watch that run, there's a lot of like really cool things that go on in it, and like a lot of the things he did we still use today. Um, and also I have to toot my own horn here, but I was one of those people that again just I didn't run any percent a lot, but I was really interested in optimizing the game. So I would go and try and learn how to do tricks. And honestly, because of a lot of my work in low percent, I figured out with a lot of help from some other runners, namely like a Zulag, like how to do a lot of things in this game. So there's a skip in Lost City that I am famous for. Pardon me. I should have grabbed a video of it to link in the chat, but anyway. If you watch any percent speedrun, there's a skip in Lost City where at the first beetle auto scroller,
Right.
um, and you free the blue birder enemy, and it bounces. You free it at a specific time, and it bounces in such a way that if you keep up with it, you can bounce over or you bounce off of it and skip the end of the room, and it saves a huge amount of time. And oftentimes, whenever I see a new runner get to that room, um, I the first thing I say in chat is, "Hi, welcome to Lost City. I'm sorry." And they look at it and they go, "Why are you sorry?" And then they try and do the thing and like maybe they get it or they don't. And then it clicks for them. They're like, "Oh, you're that guy." Oh, like that. Mind you, that's only happened like twice. So that's not really a thing.
Hey, still though.
But still, it's still a joke in the community. Like I'm just like, if you're getting to Lost City, I'm very sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to be this hard. It's honestly not that hard, in my opinion. But it's like it's one of the first big hurdles for learning the category.
Sure.
Um, and like, there's so many things I could cite that like either I had a hand in or like I did directly. Which like it sounds very egotistical, but I can back it up in this case.
No,
So
no.
like there's a lot of strategies that are still used that I made, and that's really insane to think about, even for Plague Knight. Anyway.
No, that's. I think it's really cool to hear about because one of the things as I was doing some of my research, you're really active in the community, and a lot of at least as I'm putting the picture together, I'm like, oh no, it almost it seems inevitable that you end up being a QA tester at Yacht Club because I'm just like the seeing the way that you've broken the game up, or I should say, developed these new ways of getting through it. It makes a lot of sense to me, and you touched upon something that I find you're the first person I think I've had on who does PC or a game like Shovel Knight that's on so many different platforms and is updated and has patches and all these kind of things. How does the community, how do you decide what is on the leaderboard, or how does that, I mean, do you just guys go with what the fastest, how does that work?
So when the community first started, like when I first started a Discord server, there were literally 7 people. 7. And it's kind of always been an unwritten rule in the community that we go with whatever the current patch is, usually because one, that fixes a lot of bugs that honestly sometimes cause problems.
Sure.
I won't get into that now because there's too many to go over.
Right.
But it's the like our main goal that we initially set out for was that like we wanted Shovel Knight to be a game that no matter what console you're playing on, you have a fair shot at getting the record. So if there's like a specific trick that like, I'm very thankful this is not the case. Luckily, at least it won't be soon. Like there's no specific trick that only works on PC. Like everything you can do on PC is doable on every other system. Like by matter of technicality, if you had a third arm, the 3DS would be the most optimal system to play on. But yeah.
Why, I gotta ask, why is that?
It has a touch screen. That and the Wii U both have a touch screen you can access for faster item swaps.
Got it.
Mind you, you can also like this is also allowable. So like something else we've done to like also establish like I guess comparability is a good word, or like to establish a spirit of like competitive fairness is if you're playing with keyboard, the number keys on the top of the keyboard are actually assigned to your relics. So if you're playing New Game Plus, you can just tap each one of those for immediate item switches. And for fairness, we also allow the use of joy to key on if you're playing with controller, as long as you're doing like a one-to-one button assignment, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And like, mind you, you don't really get a whole lot of options because we honestly do use a lot of buttons on the even a DualShock 4. But basically through this, we allow runners to then basically do the same thing and bind like their triangle button to the number 6. Right. Sorry about the Discord noises.
No, it's good. Didn't even hear him. Didn't hear him on my end. So.
Oh, good. Sorry. Ignored me. But so anyway, yeah, we like if you think about speedrunning, sometimes it's like, well, now you're using an outside program and all that, and I'm like, yes, but it's in the spirit of making the game like more fun for some people. Because like if you're like I myself, I don't like playing on a keyboard, not because it's like bad, it's perfectly fine. It's that like my wrists start to hurt if I am in that position for so long. So it's just more comfortable for me to use a controller. But just in the spirit of fairness, we allow controller runners to map some of their buttons to numbers so they can do immediate item switches for a few of them if they want.
How do we get from speedrunning, Shovel Knight, GDQ, all that kind of stuff to Yacht Club Games?
So let's see. Back in like late 2014, I was regularly streaming speedruns of Shovel Knight, low percent, and I would always watch my friends' streams, Taiwan Ninja, Busta Wolf, Engage, etc. And anytime one of us would be streaming, the same person would always come into our chat and say some stuff occasionally. And his name was Shane YCG. And it wasn't until one of Busta's streams that like Busta looked down and was like, "Wait, that stand for Yacht Club Games?" And Shane was like, "Yes, I'm an engine programmer over there." And we're like, "Oh, okay, cool." So like Shane for a while, Shane was like sort of our emissary to the dev team, if you will, just like voicing concerns that the community had or like questions and stuff. But I believe it was also Shane's idea to give speedrunners access to beta stuff. So like myself and a few others were actually given access to the Plague Knight beta. Not as paid testers or anything, but just as like a general feedback. And they do that for plenty of people, by the way. It's also
cool.
like a media thing that happens. Like that just happens in the industry.
That's cool. That's cool.
And like I'm allowed to say that I was, I played that, by the way. all these years later I am. Yeah. But anyway, I played the Plague beta, and I tried to give as much feedback as I could, and let them know what I thought about various items and any bugs I may have found. But like I was still very green as far as the bug finding went at that point. So like I didn't have a knowledge of how video games could break and how to interact with programs in that sort of way. We'll get to that in a little bit. And so
but you definitely had a strong foundation because of the way you've been approaching speedruns. That's pretty interesting, the fundamentals, things like that. That's cool.
Yeah. So after that, like I continued playing Shovel Knight and so they continued having interest in having me try stuff. And then like Spectre Knight beta came at some point, a couple years later, and a bunch of us got to play a bit of that. And then to finish up Spectre of Torment, I actually worked remotely as a tester, which is very, very rare, by the way, that they would ever, like any company would ever allow anyone like that's not a permanent hire to do anything like that. But I had a VPN. I was able to connect and get builds. If I may,
is the reason that that's kind of a rare thing because of the nature of the state that the game's in at that time, or what makes that kind of?
It's rare because, you think, just like you're basically like you're asking someone to like have access to material that is not known to the public yet, and you are placing a large amount of trust in them to not distribute that in any way, shape, or form.
And that's why you keep it in-house. No, that makes a lot of sense. I totally understand.
Yes, yes,
absolutely.
And so like they placed a lot of trust in me, and I'm very thankful to them for that. But so I worked for a month remotely. I think I worked a total of maybe like 65 hours because I was just doing it like after work and on my weekends. But I would just do whatever random tasks they would have me, like someone look into. And because I had familiarity with Shovel and Plague, like they'd also just hired like my actual lead now, Adam. And so since I was more familiar with the previous content, he would often have me check the stuff in there. Just like a quick note, when you're making a game like Shovel Knight, Shovel Knight was not designed to be modular, so everything uses and references everything else.
Oh, interesting.
Meaning, at any given time, anything and everything can break for practically no reason.
So it doesn't just break one room or one level; it can break the entire game. One thing, one bug.
Exactly.
Wow,
exactly.
Crazy. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I wish I could like give a more specific example.
No, it's okay.
Like it basically because of that, like they would have me do the old content, like I said, and like immediately I immediately found a lot of things that like would have happened because they were very obvious. I wasn't like super good at breaking anything, but it was just nice to have someone that was essentially do the game inside and out, just like the level designers did, and knew how and where to like find all the content and make sure everything worked. One of my tasks was playing through all of Plague of Shadows and all of Spectre of Torment in Brazilian Portuguese to see if there were any errors. Like formatting errors or instances of null. I do not speak Brazilian Portuguese, mind you. But I certainly know that parentheses null parentheses probably isn't Brazilian Portuguese.
Might be right on that.
Yeah.
Dog Developer was in the chat. He speaks Portuguese. He's Brazilian. So how funny.
Nice.
Anyway.
So basically after that, like that was my little stint working remotely, and then Spectre was done and it was out and everything. And at that time in my life, I was really, really trying to find a new job, and I didn't know what to do. So I was like applying at a bunch of places. I had a couple interviews, but I didn't land anything. And so in about May, it's about 4 months after the remote QA work, I thought to myself, well, Yacht Club is working on new stuff. They'll probably need some people for a little bit later this year. Maybe I'll just like see if I can move down there for, a few months. I'll keep some stuff up here in like NorCal and storage. And then I'll have some industry experience and just see where I go. Because I hated my job at the time. I think I messaged Shane. And I was like, oh, hey, I'm trying to look for a new job. What do you think you'll need testers later this year or whenever? If so, let me know. And I'd like to arrange moving down there to try it. And I'm dead serious, because we have been trying to arrange something like that for a little bit, because Shane thought I could be really good at it. And he, I was expecting like, oh, yeah, we'll be looking for people like in September or like this time next year or something.
Totally.
But he was like, let me talk to Adam. I'll get back to you. And then like 20, 30 minutes later or something. Actually, yeah, when can you start? I'm like, let me talk to Adam. And so, it was decided that I would start as soon as I could, which was in July. It was 2 weeks after SGDQ 2017. So I moved to LA, and thanks to a lot of help from some family and friends, I've been able to live down here and stay here. I forget that, and then I look around my room and I remember where I am in life. And it honestly does inspire me to work a little harder. It's been rough adjusting to this sort of life, honestly. This is the first time I've ever lived very far away from a lot of family. I didn't go away for college or anything like that, so it's taken some adjusting, but overall I'm happy.
Does being in-house, does that change how you approach your job, or does it enable certain things, or what are the benefits, I guess, of being in-house?
Well, I learned a hell of a lot more being in-house, obviously. Awesome. Just because you're there. And I'm not around the dev team a whole lot, but still I get it's just nice to be able to get answers to questions, or occasionally have things explained to you as far as the nitty gritty. Much to my own chagrin, I have not made much progress on my own time to become much of a developer. But we'll work on that. But I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about Visual Studio. I don't have a computer science background or anything. I have a mild IT background. So learning about all these different dev environments and how to install builds on dev kits, which strangely enough is not as simple sometimes as inserting a USB drive and clicking install, unfortunately. But yeah, I've learned a lot about how game development as a whole works, and that's something I value.
Thanks everyone for listening and watching. If you're enjoying the podcast, please feel free, subscribe, leave a comment, all that stuff people say at the end of a video. It honestly all goes a long way to help the podcast. Thank you so much. If you want to join us on Discord, we chat mostly about food, but occasionally we do talk about the stuff that's in the podcast. The link is in the show notes or in the description. Feel free. Come on by, join us. If you want to follow on Twitter, Sequence Break PC. Sequence Break PC. I post when I go live. It's kind of not at a set time, so if you want to see the live feed of the podcast, feel free, follow there. And finally, if you want to email, podcast@sequencebreakpodcast.com. Sequencebreakpodcast.com is also where you can find the backlog of all of the episodes. It's also on YouTube as well, so feel free, join in, have some fun. Thank you so much. I will see ya in the next one.